So let's jump in. We're here on Sunday morning. We want to refocus this morning on what's important. We want to refocus on Jesus and hear from him, worship him, and then hear from his word. And we get to the privilege of doing that now. And I want to consider this idea this morning that we would feel deeply about the things that Jesus felt deeply about. He felt deeply about a multitude of things, but there's a few things that I really want to pull out this morning. As we with our young adult ministry, we went through the whole Gospel of Mark. It was an awesome journey for about a year, and I have the privilege of studying the Gospel of Mark and just really looking at who is Jesus. Not what does culture say about him, not what do we understand when we're brought up and hear some wrong ideas, but who is this God-man that is our Savior and Redeemer and friend. And through that study, was able to see some things that Jesus was really passionate about, some things that he felt deeply about. And here's the idea this morning. I believe strongly that if we are to be Jesus' disciples, that we should also feel strongly about the things that Jesus felt strongly about. That those things should be primary in our lives. That's what it means to be a disciple. A disciple is not just someone who follows after someone. We see that in our culture. We can follow people. We can follow people on Twitter or on the internet. We can kind of stalk people that we like or superstars, But that doesn't mean that we really know them. It doesn't mean that we're really their disciple, right? A disciple is someone who not only follows someone, but someone who is also taking on the character of the person they're following, right? And that's what we want in our lives. We want Jesus' character in our lives so that we can show the world who he is. And that's our mission. That's our marching orders. When Jesus left the earth, he said, I want you to go and I want you to make disciples of all the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. If we are not first disciples, then we can't make disciples, right? And so in order to be true disciples, we need to be taking on his character, and we need to feel deeply about the things that Jesus felt deeply about. And so I want to consider just a few things this morning, and for you to ask yourself the question, not that we feel deeply about every one of these things or get overwhelmed this morning, but that we would say to ourselves, okay, what in this message this morning really is God speaking to me? What resonates with my heart? What should I feel more deeply about that Jesus felt deeply about? And let me say this too as a side note before we jump in to the Gospel of Mark. This is not a natural thing for us. It is not our natural inclination as human beings to be like Jesus. It is our natural inclination to be unlike Jesus. It is our natural inclination to be selfish, to not feel deeply about the things that Jesus felt deeply about, and to look away from these things, right? So we need to be intentional about it. If we're passionate about Jesus and knowing what he did for us on the cross, then these things should become a passion for us, right? And as we invest in the things that Jesus invested in, we will begin to feel deeply about those things. Just like anything else in life, when we invest, when we give our time and our money and our sweat and our tears to something, we begin to feel deeply about it, right? I know Tom and Barb, when they first went to India, they probably didn't feel nearly as passionate as they do now, being on the ground there, sweating with the people, getting to know the people, and now they have a deep passion for the people of India, right? And the same thing will happen to us as we give our hearts to Jesus, as we allow the Holy Spirit to show us the things that Jesus felt deeply about and allow him to mold and shape us. And so this morning I want to consider, and the first thing that really stood out, if you want to turn with me to the Gospel of Mark chapter 1, verses 40 through 42. The first thing that really stands out to me in this gospel is that Jesus felt deeply about the outcast. No brainer, right? But Jesus felt deeply about people who were on the periphery. I was at this wedding yesterday, beautiful time to celebrate with a friend of mine who got married. But, I was there, and I'm looking around, and all these beautiful, dressed-up people, middle class, for the most part, well-off, healthy people, right? And I was like, this isn't, and I'm thinking through the sermon, and I'm like, this isn't the people that Jesus was really concerned about. Although, obviously, he loves all those people. But for us not to forget about the people that are on the periphery. So Mark chapter 1, verses 40 through 42, it says, Jesus encountered, he says, a man with leprosy came to him and begged him on his knees. This man was a desperate man. If you are willing, you can make me clean. And Jesus, what does it say? He was moved with compassion. My translation is a little bit different. It says Jesus was indignant. Interesting, right? Some kind of connection between feeling compassion down deep in your stomach and feeling anger towards something. And Jesus obviously wasn't angry at the leper because he ended up healing the leper, right? But he was angry that this man had to go through this situation that he was living in. So Jesus was moved with compassion, or he was indignant, and he reached out his hand and he touched the man. He said, I am willing, be clean. And immediately the leprosy left him and he was cleansed. Let me give you a little bit. It's hard for us to get this story, right? We don't encounter lepers every day when we're walking down the street. But just, the idea of leprosy covered a lot of different skin diseases. It's hard just to nail it down. But I'm going to give you an idea of, in Roman culture, what a leper's existence would have been like. First, when someone who had leprosy would walk down the street among people who did not have leprosy, he would have to let people know that he had leprosy. He would literally, according to the law, would have to yell out, like, stay away from me, I'm a leper. In not so many words. He also potentially, and I watched a documentary on this, and again, like I said, there's different strands of leprosy, but in this documentary that I watched, it was interesting. Over time, with some kinds of leprosy, you can lose feeling in parts of your body. And in this documentary, there was a guy who had leprosy, and there were all these lepers, and they were around the fire, and they were cooking food, and a piece of food dropped into the fire. And, we would normally get something, a piece of, metal or wood, and pull it out of the fire. And this guy, because he had no more feeling in his hand, just stuck his hand into the fire and grabbed what was there. And as you can imagine, over time, and there were lepers that showed in this documentary, they were missing digits. Right? And over time, parts of their body would become deformed or mangled. They'd be missing body parts. And I mean, this was the existence. They also, in order to walk among people who were clean, people who were without leprosy, they would have to wear tattered clothes and just show that they were to be stayed away from. Their hair was to be kept unkempt. Right? And they also many times were made to live outside of the main town that people lived in. So that because people were so afraid to catch leprosy. And just to give you a taste, right? We don't see lepers every day, but there's all kinds of people in our culture who feel this way, who feel abandoned or left or unvalued, right? We encounter people every day like that. We don't see lepers on a regular basis, but we encounter people in those kind of situations, sin-sick hearts, right? Damaged lives. And who is that for us? Jesus reached out to this man. He didn't care what everyone thought. And he reached into this man's life and he healed him and he made a difference. And we have the opportunity to do the same thing. Not necessarily heal people physically, but we can bring healing by bringing Jesus to people's lives who are on the periphery. And I want to be real practical this morning. I mean, obviously, first and foremost, we think about Jesus' heart were orphans and widows. And we want to be part of ministries in India and our urban impact ministry and ministries that impact. And just on a regular basis, we want to be part of impacting people's lives who are orphaned and widowed. But we want to go beyond that. And I was thinking about who are the people in our church who are on the periphery. And I don't want to offend anyone this morning, but the first people that came to mind to me were single moms. You know, not someone who we automatically think, you know, that they're abandoned or overlooked, but really a lot of times they're going through hard times and we overlook them. Or the divorced person who so many times is, you know, looked down on in the church. And people who end up being on the periphery. I get to work with our young adult ministry, and I see people when they get into their upper 30s, their 40s, and they're still single. Life can be very difficult when you're in that situation. And I just want to, you know, who is it for us that's on the periphery? Who is it for us that's the outcast? And it's not necessarily like what's obvious at first, but we all in some way encounter the outcast that we can be Jesus' hands and feet to. And this was Jesus' heart. It impacted him. The word that's used in this passage it says that Jesus was moved with compassion, right? And it literally means that his insides were moved. His spleen, literally, was moved inside of him, or his innards were moved inside of him. And it's just kind of that feeling. You know that feeling when you're angry down deep inside about something, or you feel deeply about something? This is what Jesus felt deeply about, the outcast. And I think I want to show you a video. I think this is a good picture that describes this word that Jesus felt. So we have that video. You been watching the Olympics? I could seriously sit for 2 weeks straight and do nothing but watch. I mean, it's captivating, and even more so for someone who's vested. You know, here's parents, and they feel deeply about what was going on there. Their daughter, Allie Raisman, in the gymnastics competition, and what a bummer, man. I wanted her to get at least the bronze. She got ripped off. She tied. And she still didn't get a medal. How does that work? I don't know, but they have that feeling down deep in their stomach, right? That we should have towards people that Jesus felt this way towards. So the outcast. The second thing that stood out as we went through the gospel, and actually we're going to be in John chapter 2 for a minute here. Jesus felt deeply about people having access to worshiping his Father. You might be familiar with this story, John chapter 2, verses 13 through 16. Some theologians say this actually happened twice during the ministry of Jesus. At the beginning of his ministry, he cleared the temple, and then in another gospel, when it talks about the story, a lot of theologians say it was a second time that he did that. It's debatable. It might have been the same story told by two different people. It might have happened twice. But Jesus got angry here. And read with me John chapter 2, verses 13 through 16. When it was almost time for the Jewish Passover, Jesus went up to Jerusalem, and in the temple courts he found people selling cattle, sheep, and doves, and others sitting at tables exchanging money. So he made a whip out of cords, and he drove all from the temple courts, both sheep and cattle. He scattered the coins of the money changers and overturned their tables. To those who sold doves, he said, "Get out of here. Stop turning my Father's house into a market." We see Jesus again feeling deeply. And I think the real issue here was that people were getting in the way of others wanting to access the Father. People were getting in the way of people who wanted to come and worship God. And Jesus got angry about that. He felt deeply in his stomach. This is a different word that's used of Jesus here. I think it's orge, wrath. Like, Jesus really was mad, right? Anger is not a sin. What does it say in Ephesians? Be angry, but don't sin. So the anger is not the sin. It's what you do with the feeling of anger. It's what you're angry at. It's how long you're angry at something. And Jesus was angry that people would have the gall to get in the way of others who wanted a relationship with God. And so he did something about it. He felt the feeling deep in his stomach, and then he responded by doing something about it. I mean, can you imagine? Here's Jesus. This isn't how we picture Jesus all the time. He made a whip. He walked in, he saw what was going on, and he made a whip, and he drove people out. Not just the animals, but the people. Get out of here. You're not allowed to do this in my Father's house. And Jesus didn't sin, but he was angry at something that is worth getting angry about. Our problem isn't getting angry. Our problem is getting angry at the wrong things. Or the traffic light and the person in front of us is annoying us because they didn't go fast enough, or, but are we getting angry at the things that Jesus got angry about? It started out as a practical thing, right? People had to come from hundreds of miles to bring sacrifices to God, right? And so people, in practicality, said, let's have sheep here that they can buy, and we'll just we'll make it easier for them so they don't have to carry their sheep for 100 miles to sacrifice to God. But what it turned into, initially convenience, turned into an obstruction, right? And it became, okay, you can't bring sheep anymore. You have to buy the sheep here if you want to sacrifice the right sheep to God, right? And then out of convenience also, you had to use the currency in the temple, right? And so they said, well, we'll exchange money for people so they can use the right currency to buy what they have to buy. And so initially it was out of convenience, but what it became was, oh man, we can make money off of this. Let's mark it up a little bit. And so this is when Jesus said, no, it's not okay. And this gets really practical for us, right? This gets really practical for us. What are we doing? What are we doing to obstruct other people from coming to Jesus? And many times it's just our lives. Are we representing Jesus well? Or are we being the type of Christian who attracts people to Jesus? Are we pointing people to Jesus by how we live and not being an obstruction? It also gets really practical here at our church. We want to be welcoming here, right? We want the first thing when people come in here, we want people to feel at home here. There should be nothing that repels people here, except for, like our pastor says, what a great statement. The only thing that should offend people when they come to Zarephath is the gospel, right? They should feel at home when they come in the door. I don't care about your lifestyle or what's going on in your life. You should feel at home here because that's how Jesus would make people feel. And if you're offended by what Jesus says, then so be it. That's not just offense, that's conviction. So only the gospel should offend. And, I was debating on whether to talk about this. I ended up talking about it last night. But this whole thing with Chick-fil-A, it got a little twisted, right? Here's a company that's been on the right path for years and years, just trying to be pro-family, right? And it got turned into being anti-homosexual. And so many times, we become, as Christians, we become the anti-people instead of the pro-people. And a lot of times it's our fault. And in this case, I feel like it got so twisted around. Are you familiar with the story at all? the son of the man who started Chick-fil-A made a statement about being pro-family and not being in agreement with the homosexual lifestyle. And, it turned into him being anti-homosexual or hating homosexuals and not wanting to serve them chicken. And that wasn't it. It's so interesting. I saw an interview with Truett Cathy afterwards, and the man who started Chick-fil-A, and he said, we just want to serve chicken. we just want to feed hungry people. We're not trying to be anti-homosexual. Which actually he didn't say that. He just avoided the subject altogether. But we need to be like that. We need to welcome the homosexual, right? And then let the gospel offend them. The truth of the gospel, we need to preach sin also. The truth of the gospel is homosexuality is a sin. And we need to give people that truth. But if a homosexual walks in this door, we're going to love them until they realize that truth. We're going to build a relationship with them. And then when we have a relationship with them enough that they want to listen to us, then we could share with them, man, I don't think what you're doing is what God wants in your life. But initially, when they come in the door, man, if we're like, man, I can't be near that guy, because then we're not being like Jesus. So what are we doing that makes people feel at home? Helping people to come to worship the Father uninhibited. That was the heart of Jesus. And one more thing that stands out about Jesus and what he felt deeply about. There's a story in Mark chapter 6 that you also might be familiar with, when Jesus fed 5,000 people. A beautiful miracle of Jesus. The small lunch of a boy, 5 loaves and 2 fish, brought to Jesus, and he fed 5,000 people. But interesting, right, in this story, Mark chapter 6, verses 32 through 34, it says, so they went away by themselves, this is Jesus and his disciples, in a boat to a solitary place. But many who saw them leaving recognized them and ran on foot from all the towns and got there ahead of them. When Jesus landed and saw a large crowd, he had compassion. The same word is used here. He felt deeply in his stomach for these people. And why did he have this feeling? He had compassion on them because they were like, what does it say? They were like sheep without a shepherd. So, although it's wrapped up in the story, I don't think the main issue was that the people were hungry. Although, again, that's part of it. But Jesus was concerned about these people more so because they were like sheep without a shepherd. So God's heart, the heart of Jesus, what Jesus felt deeply about here was people who didn't have direction in their life. And we encounter people like that every day. And we have the best direction for everybody to have in the world. I mean, we have the direction for people, right? And so the question is, are we looking for opportunities to share that direction with people? And it gets really practical. I think about when I was a freshman in college, and I had graduated high school. It was really a down time in my life. I've never actually gone through a time of depression, but I was lost. I had graduated high school. All the people that I thought were my really good friends ended up not being such good friends. I hadn't made new friends yet. I was at a new school. I went to Rutgers University in Camden, and during that time, the man who was the youth pastor at the church that I would go to sporadically, he sought me out. He realized that I didn't have a lot of direction in my life, and he came alongside me. He invited me to a small group at the church. I connected with people there, and it changed my whole life. And I found direction. I found purpose in Jesus. And at that time, I gave my heart to Jesus, and I was the most annoying Christian that you'll ever meet, because I believe, for the first time, I really believed the gospel and who Jesus was, and I didn't have any friends. I was kind of like didn't care, and I went to Rutgers University, and I had Jesus written real big across my backpack, and I was loaded down with tracts to hand to people. And I'm sure when people saw me coming, they were like, all right, stay away from that guy. He's really annoying. And we don't want to be that guy, right? I'm like anti-tract now because of my experience. Because I think what really impacts people's lives is building a relationship and pointing them to Jesus. Although there is a place for tracts from time to time, so don't get offended if you have tracts in your purse, and you can keep them and hand them out from time to time. But I found direction in Jesus because a man reached out to me and to my heart, and it changed the direction of my life. And so what does that look like for us? And I just want you to consider, there are tons of people in your everyday experience who are without direction that we need to be intentional about reaching out to. But let me go a step further. In the church here, we have children's ministry. I mean, lots of people who are in the formative years of their life, in our youth ministry, in our young adult ministry, a lot of places that get connected where we can help people have direction in their life. And are we being part of that? And let me say this in closing. So many times we can get focused on what's happening at the church. And let me rewind for a minute. This starts at home. And first and foremost, I'm talking to the men here who are fathers and who are husbands. And yeah, I'm pointing my finger because I want to say this strongly, that giving direction starts at home. So don't be the dad who's here so much, or even working too much. And I know God is not okay with people being lazy, and it's our call to work hard, but our first and our foremost ministry is to our wife and our children. And there needs to be balance there, and there's seasons of life where you have to work harder, and so don't get me wrong, right? But don't be the church junkie who says, I'm ministering for God, and then your children are at home and they're without direction because you're not there, right? And your wife is lost because you're not coming alongside her first and foremost. And so the direction starts at home, and it's our ministry as men to do that and to come alongside our wives and our children. And then from there, then we can reach out and in our everyday experience to be someone who gives people the direction of Jesus. And in our church, to look for opportunity to give young people and other people who are without direction that can only be found in Jesus. And so much to consider this morning, and I don't want you to be overwhelmed. There's a lot here, but what is Jesus speaking to your heart? How can we be people who feel more deeply about the things that Jesus felt deeply about? And I want to consider that this morning as we take communion. We get to celebrate together. If those who are going to lead worship, if you guys want to come forward, and we get to celebrate Jesus together. What a beautiful thing to remember. And this is first and foremost, we can live this lifestyle, we can be representatives of Jesus because of what he did on the cross, right? And we don't live to be right with God. We look to the cross, and then we have the opportunity to live in response to that. And this celebration of communion is to remember that. And we want to do that. And this morning, if those who are going to serve communion, if you want to come forward, and we'll give you direction, and you'll come from the back and forward and take the elements and then sit down, and then we'll partake together. But let me say this also: if you have a relationship with Jesus, if you've trusted him, if you've committed your life to him, then this is a time to celebrate together and come and take communion. If you have not committed your life to Jesus and your heart to Jesus, then I would say this is a time for you just to enjoy the music. But if you want to commit your heart to Jesus for the first time, then this is a time that you can do that as well and partake of his body and his blood that he sacrificed for us. So come from the back, take the elements, have a seat, and then we'll partake together.